I am Sarah Noel with Whole and Balanced Life Coaching, and this is part 1 of Optimizing the Brain in Crisis. Building neurotypical pathways to improve relationships, increase productivity, and reduce stress and anxiety for high-functioning manual processing brains, ASD spectrum, OCD, ADHD, anxiety, and other overwhelmed processors. There are auto processors, manual processors, hyperprocessors, and you may or may not relate to the ones we're focusing on this week, but just hear it out because most likely you'll have someone in your life that you work with, live with, interact with that has this type of processing brain, and it's very important to understand why and how people do what they do. Just like the story we told about if you're at the swimming pool with your friends and someone's splashing you and you're getting really irritated, like how rude, why are they doing this to me? And then you turn around and see they're drowning. Once you understand why people are doing things, it takes away so much of the stress and the anguish that it's causing in your life. So understanding different types of processes can help you feel good about yourself and how you process, and also about others who process in different ways that you do, so you can help understand and have richer relationships. We're going to start by talking about Manny. He's a hero. He doesn't really feel like a hero, though, because he is in an office full of auto processors, and he is Manny, the manual processor. And he thinks everyone feels like him, and so he doesn't feel like he's doing anything heroic by living outside of his comfort zone. And he thinks, everyone has to get out of their comfort zone once in a while. But what he doesn't realize is that he is a rare commodity. He is basically living outside his comfort zone day in and day out for the people he loves and respects. And he keeps showing up, even if it's hard, even if it's stressful. He keeps showing up, being a boss. This is Otto. Otto's an auto processor, sometimes referred to as a neurotypical. He inputs mountains of data. But he has a network of support and automated sorters that make the job seem effortless. So he walks into a room, he's going to notice everything in the room. His brain doesn't even have to acknowledge it because he has these machines that are saying, this isn't necessary. You don't have to think about that. You don't have to remember that. You don't have to really notice that. The only things that cross his desk are the most important things. So he has a very manageable workload. So he doesn't seem stressed out at all. Now, Manny likes Otto. They're friends. And sometimes Manny can get kind of frustrated with Otto because he does everything so fast that he misses details. He can see him making mistakes sometimes. And it mystifies him. He doesn't think that he's very bright. He seems to make choices recklessly or carelessly. And so he doesn't have a lot of confidence in his choices because he makes them so quickly. But he sees that he's well liked and he's somehow figured out the code. Get people to like you and want to be around you, expectations people have. So Manny likes spending time with Otto, even though they're very different. And this is Manny. He's a manual processor, and he faces the same workload as Otto, but the work is performed manually. As each piece of mail crosses his desk, he notices the weight of it, the size, the dog-eared corners, the color, the little heart sticker, the addresses, the handwriting inconsistencies. He's dealing with stacks and stacks and stacks, and he only has a small window of time to do it. So he's working overtime, and Otto appreciates that he's a hard worker, he's dedicated, he is serious, he's honest, and he does notice details. Now, if this was a mom and pop corporation, like a small law firm, he would be great. There's people that love that personal attention to detail. Other people, they want just the bulk work done, right? And so they're going to go to a corporate lawyer who's just going to run tons of cases through, and you don't even have to think about it. So the stress comes not from what kind of processor you are, but if you are in an environment where you're supposed to be processing in a way that doesn't come naturally to you. It's not impossible. Obviously, we are proving it every day as we show up to things that aren't in our natural skill set, and we're doing them amazingly anyway. But you can see how this can be stressful because your talents aren't going to be able to shine here. You don't have enough mental energy to actually do what you love and take the time that you love to take because there's so many piles to get through that you have to kind of streamline. And then the quality and quantity of work is kind of compromising each other. And Manny's don't like to sacrifice quality. They know how to do things the right and the best way. And it can be really distressing to not be able to do it the way they know it should be done, and even when they see other people do that. You can see that this can cause a lot of stress, but here they are every day, man versus machine, like the legend of John Henry, who said, look, with my hammer, I'm going to beat this automatic steam drill, and I'm going to lay just as many tiles through this mountain. And he actually did. He won. But at what price? He died with a hammer in his hand, and you can see that trying to keep up that pace in that kind of an environment, something's going to give. You're either going to have a breakdown or you're going to have to cut out certain things in your life and streamline so you can have the hyper focus you need to accomplish insurmountable tasks.
I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me.
There's people who are the dreamers and they're going to have an idea, but they don't know how to make that idea come to fruition. There's other people who know how to do the cogs to practically turn that idea into reality. And then there's people who are good at selling that idea or marketing it or supporting it or teaching it. So we all have our gifts and talents and we work together like the yin and the yang. So some of the strengths that manual processors have are they're really great with safety, keeping people safe. Details, attention to details like we talked about before. And I'll tell you, I had to mail back a key to one of my landlords when I was going to school. And I put it in an envelope, I wrapped it in paper. I thought that would pad it enough. But I didn't put that it should be manually processed on it. So it got run through the machine and it jammed up the machine. It ripped open my envelope. It lost the key. It was a $200 key. So there are times when things definitely need to be handled manually and other times where you have a ton of stuff to be processed where you need an auto processor. So quality control, definitely quality control, great at patterns. And that's why this new method that we are going to be introducing to you later is going to be such an exciting new tool in your tool belt. Consistency, logical, they're honest. Typically, they don't usually play head games. They can work independently, and that's good too. If you identify with the manual processing brain, you may have grown up feeling like you weren't a good person. You may have been accused of being selfish because you didn't feel like going to a social event when you were feeling overwhelmed, or rude or self-centered because you told someone you didn't like the food they gave you because that was the honest truth. And so you might have started believing it, but I want you to understand this is not any kind of deficiency. It's just the brain's way of conserving energy.
Is that cells do what nations do when they go to war, is they harden their borders and don't trust their neighbors.
The scientific research that backs up Alicia Ford's theory that the brain goes into survival mode when it's overstimulated so that it can shut down and focus and reserve its mental energy. As you can see, the ATP, which is the energy that fuels the cells in the mitochondria, is leaking out of the cell. And then it bonds to the receptors on the outside of the cell, so now the cell cannot receive or communicate with anyone else. It focuses the remaining energy that it has on the task at hand. And it's in survival mode, so it literally cannot afford to do any hierarchy of tasks or communicate or work together with any other cells if it wants to survive. You know how your cell phone goes into low power mode when the battery's low? The lights dim a little and you can't do any kind of complex downloading or processes. Well, imagine going through life like that. Even the smallest things can seem overwhelming because you're already drained. Whether it's a mess, background noise, they call that the cocktail party syndrome, things that distract you, expectations people have, things that you need to do that you don't want to do, all of that can feel overwhelming. So even seemingly small tasks can be like the straw that broke the camel's back. So whether you identify as a manual processor, an auto processor, or a hyper processor, once we're under stress and feeling anxiety, we are in survival mode. And with that lower energy and ATP to process, you can see it would be hard to feel that hierarchy of emotion. You're down there in the red at the basic needs of food, shelter, clothing, air. You're not going to be thinking about how to decorate your bedroom. Or if you're an elementary school teacher, can you imagine trying to teach multiplication tables to a child who hadn't eaten for 3 days? No, first we need to take care of our basic needs, calm down the brain, and then all the helpful therapies and things that we're trying to do to get ahead will be able to function properly. So like the cells in survival mode that are just thinking, I need to do what I need to do, theory of mind is a higher state where you're thinking, what do they need? What do they think? What do they want? And it's almost an impossible task when you're in survival mode. But if you take time, you can focus. Yoga is helpful, breathing is helpful, meditation is helpful, but you can see with the brain on fire, still input, demands, and deadlines coming at you from every direction, it would be really hard to fix that just with deep breathing. It's like having a boiling pot of water on the stove and putting a lid on it to stop it from boiling over. What needs to be done is turning off the heat. So that brings us to Alicia Ford's box sorting method. Remember those piles of papers that were on Manny's desk? That's all the input and the data that your brain is holding on to. And in order to get rid of it and not have it piled up on your desk, you've got to sort it somewhere. Well, it seems that manual brains typically just sort into 2 boxes, necessary and trash. So if it comes in, if it's something that's easy to understand, if it makes sense, if it makes life easier and better, it goes in the necessary box. Everything else is trash. So your necessity box is kind of like your safe box. And as the trash bin gets fuller and fuller, the box seems to get smaller and smaller. We'll come back to that idea later. But first I want to talk about everyone's necessity box is going to look very different. For some people, it might be music. They love music. They can't live without it. They can't think or focus without it. For other people, that would be distracting. They need silence. It's a case of one man's trash is another man's treasure. So some people would love video games. It's their big escape to help their mind just relax and decompress. Other people might be TV, or maybe it's something healthy like going outside and running. Or maybe it's something very unhealthy like drugs or alcohol or sex, anything that will give release or relief. Well, others feel like they get peace and relief in religion. They pray and feel calmer or get ideas of things to do, or they do service and feel better. And then on the other hand, you have those where religion is just another expectation and a stress. You're thinking very literally and exactly. You might beat yourself up for not reading enough scripture, not praying enough, or when you're praying, you're just not feeling the relief that you're asking for, and it can be very stressful. Whatever you choose in your necessary box, there's no judgment. This is what you need to feel safe. And so you can see that because most things are going to go in the trash bin, it's going to fill up really quick. And when it gets overloaded, spontaneous combustion. We can see it's not really spontaneous, that it's been building up. And with nowhere to put these files, I'll look at them later, I'll figure it out later. It gets overloaded. And then that's when we have meltdowns. And that's when there's usually either some sort of crash or outburst or something where they have to just empty everything from the trash. They'll feel a little more relaxed, like, okay, my trash bin's been emptied now. You know, when people make requests or expectations of me, it doesn't seem overwhelming because you're starting back over at zero. But there are ways to avoid this spontaneous combustion or these dumpster fires. This happened during the pandemic with a lot of businesses. And one of my favorite ones is Mod Pizza. And they used to serve these really delicious milkshakes, but they closed down for a while in pandemic, and when they opened up again, they had half the staff. They closed down their dining room, and they took everything off the menu that wasn't a high profit item. And they reduced the menu to very basic and streamlined so that they would only have to buy a certain amount of ingredients because they were financially in crisis and trying to survive the pandemic. So they had to streamline. So thinking of that and thinking of streamlining mental energy, would it make any sense for me to go to Mod Pizza and for this nice little cashier that showed up during the pandemic to complain to her and insist that she give me a milkshake? I like milkshakes. You're supposed to give me a milkshake. Mod Pizza, it says online that you serve milkshakes. I want a milkshake. I want it now. No, that would stress her out. There's nothing she can do about it. There's no milkshakes available. There's not even cream in the fridge, so she couldn't make you one. And so it's upsetting to me. And it's upsetting to her, and it doesn't do any good. It's a complete waste of mental energy. So getting mad at someone because they function differently than you, and this goes on both sides, is not going to be productive. Understanding and learning how things work and learning to adapt is obviously going to be a way that produces more mental energy to be spent on important things. So one way I could handle it is being like, hey, thank you for being here in pandemic during this stressful time. And thank you for making these pizzas. I love these pizzas. You make really great pizzas. Focus on the things they are doing well and don't get hung up on the things that aren't done your way or what you want when you want. And again, necessary box is going to look different. Some of the things that don't get put in the necessary box are complex feelings, maybe nuances, recognizes different energy, facial expressions. And again, this will be different with different people. But you may feel like, how come, I'm in a relationship and I don't really feel like it looks like others are feeling, or when am I going to like fall in love, or there's some sort of expectation of a feeling that you are not actually feeling in your body, and you're wondering, is there something wrong with me? Am I going to ever be able to feel in love and stay in love? Or maybe you don't feel sorry or empathetic. Somebody got hurt or you hurt their feelings and you honestly don't feel sorry. They were in the way, they were impeding process. You said something sharply and they're crying and they're creating more mental crisis for you because like, now I have to deal with this. And you honestly aren't feeling empathetic or sorry because, they've kind of deserved it and you want to feel sorry and you're feeling like, man, am I a bad person because I'm not feeling this? But sometimes those feelings there's not enough mental capacity to go there at that moment. And so it doesn't mean that it's impossible, but at that moment when you're feeling those feelings, that's just a telltale sign that, oh, I am in survival mode right now. And so that's when you can refocus that, okay, let's look at my dumpster. How can I compact the trash? How can I sort things out so that I can start being free to have a hierarchy of feelings and emotions and enjoy an enriched life? Also, you might have emotions that maybe feel inappropriate for the time, like somebody gets hurt and you want to laugh at them, or they're mad at you and you feel like laughing, or maybe you're praying and, you're praying for help to not feel this anxiety anymore, and you're not getting it alleviated. Or you're praying for faith, to feel the Spirit, to know if it's true, and you're not feeling anything. Like, is God really there? You're having this crisis of faith, because honestly, when you're in crisis, being able to feel some of those feelings, that is an unnecessary thing. It's just like when you get into fight or flight mode, a lot of the blood rushes away from the stomach and into your brain and the muscles, so you can run and you can think. So digestion is not a process that needs to be done to survive. So of course, the blood leaves the area where there's digestion and goes to where it can be better used. And that's what's happening here. Okay, and sometimes addiction happens when our safe box gets smaller and smaller and our trash box gets bigger and bigger. And pretty soon, it seems like the whole world is trash. And there's very, very little space that you can retreat to get reprieve from that trash. And you're asked to live in it every day, to work in it every day. And it can be very overwhelming. And without the skills and the understanding, it can feel very hopeless. And so don't feel bad if you've had times where you've broken down, or you've been upset, or you've made choices that you're not proud of because you were in survival mode, you were overwhelmed, and you did something to escape those feelings. That is completely understandable. Not to condone any practice of escape or anything like that, but it's very understandable considering what your brain is processing and working through every day. And so it would make sense that somebody would want to escape that. Now, there's healthier ways to do it, obviously, but if you don't have the right coping skills and you don't have the understanding of what's going on and how to deal with it, there's a lot of escapes. Of course, the obvious ones are some sort of addiction, either sexually or with recreational drugs or abusing prescription drugs. And that gives a temporary reprieve from the stress or the anxiety or the feelings or the overwhelm. And then when that becomes your only coping mechanism, the only thing that feels good, then your brain actually changes and it registers this self-soothing or this escape as part of a necessary box, where it's just like food, air, shelter, and now this self-soothing. These are what's needed to survive. And so it can be reprogrammed. You can reprogram your brain. Your brain is so amazing, but you need to be aware of this. And if you've gotten to where your safe box is very small, and addictions or escapes or whatever we use can be even working. Some people just pour themselves into work. Sometimes it's video games, or, you name it. Any pleasurable activity can be an escape. Reading books even, right? It's not bad inherently. But if you're using it to escape instead of to process or deal with or confront or take care of issues, then it can become a problem and you can become isolated, and then you're less able to deal with life, because the more you avoid problems, the bigger and bigger they get and the harder it is to process through them. Just like during this last pandemic, again, this is a great example where people who had maybe social anxieties or overstimulated, but they'd learned to go to school every day. They kind of figured out how to navigate it. But then after being home for a while and taking a break, it's like almost like starting at square one again, where it's like, okay, now even the thought of leaving home to go to any kind of youth group activity or see anyone is feeling like too much, because you got out of the habit of stretching yourself and getting, finding out this thing is scary. It's an unknown. It's very stressful. And then you go and you're like, oh, actually it wasn't that bad, and you have enough repeated experiences of that. And then you have strength to do hard things later. But as you have retreated and escaped from having to learn and struggle and stretch, then it makes those feelings feel even stronger and stronger until it's like, oh, there's no way I can cope with this without escaping. And, this is where some people start even harming themselves or having thoughts that they want to end their life because they don't see any hope or any way to live in the trash. And there's no escape from it. And that hopeless, overwhelmed feeling is a horrible place to be, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. This is Anthony, and he had hyper-processing brain and was always very active. And even though his story may not be the same as yours, I think we can all relate in the ways where when you're feeling hopeless and when you feel like you've burned all bridges, how getting some new information or a new skill or new understanding or paradigm can change everything and give you the strength to actually have hope to move on and see a future.
Called Alicia, I was struggling with everything. I got told to go kill myself. Just do it. Nobody actually cares. Alicia was the last resort of everybody. We did not get along. Just was hungry, homeless for a long time. Just living on the streets, doing meth and drugs every day. Because I've died twice. Nobody knows about the second time, but I died in the hospital. They brought me back. I swear on my life, what Alicia taught me helps me a lot. It made me closer to my grandma. It made me closer to my nephews that I've lost for 4 years. And I wake up crying in my sleep sometimes. It hurts. Because it's I've burned so many bridges. I have nobody, basically, when I was called Alicia. I had nobody. Just my crazy girlfriend that was on meth every day. Getting arrested, doing stuff I shouldn't be doing. It really helps what Alicia got me into. And it's like smoking weed and meth, but it's way better than that. It's like smoking the air. It's better, so much better and healthier. And
We joke about how he's high on life.
it's great. Life had the cops on me since I was like 17. I started everything up, like Xanax. I slowly moved up to meth. If I told you everything about my life, you'd be like, what the frick? I'm a whole different ball game. I'm out of Afghanistan in my head. It's great. I'm still at that spot where it's like I'm still feel like I'm being hunted by like the
You're
devil.
not out of the woods yet.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to say.
You're getting out of the woods.
I'm getting out of the woods and I'm becoming the man I want to be. That's World War Z right there.
Yep.
Zombies. I respect my parents a lot more. I swear on this stuff Alicia's doing and says. I thought it was crazy too at first. I was like, she ain't gonna get into my head. I'm not easy to break. Like, I ain't broken to any cop. I've not broken to anybody. But I broke to Alicia for some reason.
How to get in your head?
I don't know how, but you got in. My head's like hard. It's hard as a rock. But now it's like my head has cleared from the smoke of gunfires, tanks, every plane in Afghanistan to stop. So I like calling it Afghanistan because I'm going against zombies and terrorists. I just swear on this, it helps. That was going to be the end of my life that day. If she didn't take me in, like I said, I would have been dead. But not a loss, like, I don't know where I'd go after this. But I look at my life a lot clearer now because it's just shocking I can change. I never thought I could change. I swear on this thing what Alicia's doing is really great. So
It's the only possible way, right?
it is kind
The
of.
software, right? The brain software. Let's get it
Yeah.
upgrade going.
I was like a 2-wheel drive Prius, now I'm a 4-wheel drive F350 dually. So count me in 5,000%. I'll help.
So as he's found hope to do something besides just his addiction, now he's thinking, oh, now maybe I can be successful at rehab. Maybe I can be successful at life because I never had any hope or any skills before or understood why I was the way I was. I just felt bad that I was always wrong. And so even if you don't relate in that drastic of terms or you haven't turned to drugs or anything like that, I think we can relate to when, you know, we get over anxious or your thoughts run away with you or you have worries or stresses or you're thinking too far into the future and projecting things that are causing mental anguish and stress. And when that doesn't seem to ever go away, how draining that can be and exhausting. But then if you find a way that can change that, and it doesn't feel like there's a possibility of change if that's the way you've always just felt your whole life. But when Anthony found this idea, you know, it doesn't mean that he's going to be successful his whole life. And it's not the end of the story. It's just the beginning. But it was just enough hope to give him strength to go forward and try new things and to implement this. And it's made a big difference. And he's one of the proponents of saying, I'm in 5,000%. I want to help anyone who's having issues and who's giving up to learn these skills. And the first set of skills, because there's so many wonderful skills to deal with. There was a really kind of gruesome and inhumane experiment done scientifically where they took some wild rats and they timed how long it would take them to drown. And rats are notorious for being strong swimmers. But after only 2 minutes or so, these wild rats would drown. And so they tested on domestic rats and they found out that the domestic rats lasted 3 to 5 times longer. They were going up to 15 minutes. And they thought, what could this possibly be? And so they did another study where they took domestic rats. And then right around 15 minutes, when they thought they were going to be giving up, they helped them out of the water, they pet them, they gave them care, and then they tried the experiment again later after they'd recovered. And unbelievably, now these rats were swimming for 3 hours and up to 6 days. And it just blew their minds. What made the difference? Well, the wild rats never had any hope of rescue. They'd never been shown any escape or outlet or aid from someone else. So when they did everything they could do and they saw it wasn't working, they just gave up. And that's where we don't want to be, because there is help, there is rescue, and there's all these people here who are reaching out. And there's so many different skills and DBT skills and the real love theories and all these things that can help our mental capacity and bring peace to our minds and elevate our quality of life. But just like with the hierarchy of theory of mind, if we don't take care of the initial crisis that's causing us to be in survival mode, then all those other therapies and really good, well-researched, efficient, and effective therapies will have short shelf life. We're going to have Alicia come on here and explain some of the things that she found in how to compact the trash in your dumpster so it doesn't overfill so much, and how to sort it into different boxes. So next week, stay tuned for that. And in the meanwhile, thank you for coming on here. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for supporting and being that hope for each other, that we're not alone and that there is another way. And this is like drinking from a fire hydrant. It's a lot of information. So feel free to take it in little pieces and come back whenever